Good night and welcome to Mindful Live 317. I am your host Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is the 28th of November. November is nearly to an end. In fact, 2023 on a whole is nearly to an end. So once you're inside of the live, make sure you hit that like button, double tap the screen over there on TikTok. That's how you hit the like button there. If you are viewing this on YouTube, on the repeat or even live, make sure you hit that like button on the repeat. This may be a very good time to hit that like button. You know, before you get into the swing of everything, you just hit the like button and then go ahead, so you don't have to worry about that too much. All right. First article I'm jumping into today. A very interesting article. A bit detailed, but going through some interesting history as pertaining to Trinidad and our gang culture and how the gang culture came to be. What were the origins of it? How did it blossom the way it did? Wonderful night to you too, Cheryl Valley. How did it blossom the way it did? And the history is telling. The history is telling. It tells a story that the gang culture in Trinidad and Tobago wasn't purely organic. It didn't just burst out of gang seeds and grow without being watered and allowed to flourish by outside actors. Let's dive into that story and see exactly what we're talking about. The changing face of TNT's gang culture. The faces of gangs in TNT have changed in the past 2 decades as their lives are often short-lived. Gang leaders live a life of notoriety. Just look at the memeable Cedric Berkey Burke, who died during the pandemic. Today, The Guardian investigates how gang culture emerged, how it evolved, and how it impacts on crime in the country. In 2017, 2 years after Dr. Keith Rowley administration assumed office, then Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi told the country that the police were keeping a close tab on some 2,484 suspected gang members whose names, whereabouts, and alleged activities were known to the authorities. A year later, the anti-gang bill was unanimously passed in the lower house, which he said saw a reduction in gangs. Al-Rawi said statistics from TNT Police Service showed that between 2018 and 2020, the number of gangs dropped from 211 to 129, while the total number of people involved in gangs decreased from 2,400 to 1,044 during the same period. Now, if during the period, good night Hex and Pie, if during the period they were saying they knew the gangs were there, they were paying attention, and actually they saw a serious drop in the gangs. If you saw a drop in the number of gangs and a drop in the number of gangsters, how come the number of murders never dropped? Are you saying that less men are just killing more now? I mean, theoretically it is possible, but you understand that's a hard ask to ask people to believe, that somehow you are denting the gangs, but the gangs still remain murdering as much as they always were. Okay. Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines also disclosed that for the period 2015 to July 2022, there were 1,181 gang-related murders. For the 6 months of 2023, Hines said the police recorded 242 murders, of which 114 were gang-related. At last year's launch of the Gang Reduction and Community Empowerment GRACE program, the then acting police commissioner MacDonald Jacob said there were 6 main gangs operating in the country. However, he did not identify them. Jacob attributed 60% of the country's murders to gangs, while 80% of the shootings and woundings were gang-related. He said to successfully hold gang members accountable for their crimes, police officers needed more training. The police have since arrested and charged a handful of men under the Anti-Gang Act. Gangs consolidating economies of scale, Wide Leather says. And I was thinking the same thing. To me, telling me about the number of gangs in my country is nearly irrelevant. because the number of gangs does not tell a clear picture of the amount of criminality. You could tell me that there were once 200 and something gangs, and they have now been reduced to 3. And actually, it's worse because now it's 3 humongous, enormous gangs that are nearly impossible to dismantle. Do they know who is the gang leaders are? Well, that's what they're going to continue talking about here. Among them was Calvin Tyson Lee of Port of Spain, who in 2020 was charged with being a gang leader and receiving a stolen motor vehicle. The others were charged with supporting a gang. Several of the country's most reputed and feared gang leaders, we're going back in history now, who had held secret meetings with prime ministers, politicians, and public officials to broker peace with warring gangs in exchange for lucrative state contracts, positions, and jobs, have been killed over the years. Now, I was mentioning this when people were talking about the negotiations and whether police were part of it. You see, the sad thing with if the police were involved, or if any kind of authorities are involved with negotiating peace with the gangs, for you to be an effective power broker, you have to be able to offer the gangs something they want. Here, in this story, they talk about throughout history where the offerings that the gangs have been given were state contracts, positions, and jobs. The first meeting dates back to 1957, when TNT's first Prime Minister and founder of the People's National Movement, PNM Party, the late Dr. Eric Williams, held talks with the henchmen of the marabuntas and desperados who were waging war with each other in Laventille. This resulted in the launch of the Special Works Program to create jobs for the unemployed. So, you see, the idea of talking to criminal elements and attempting to give them money so that they don't do crime is not a new idea. The idea that all they need is work. If you get the ghetto youth work, it take all this crime on is work the ghetto youth need. Is the unemployment in the ghetto, how them do it? That seems to have been the go-to strategy and technique since independence. 1957, Dr. Eric Williams meeting with the marabuntas and desperados. To be honest though, the retro gangsters chose better names. Like, if you had to get me in a gang, marabuntas, the name has a bit of a kind of a Jeppy feel to it, you know? Yeah. You could catch me tagging marabuntas on that bridge somewhere. The Maras, M-A-R-A-Z, and cross through, Maras. Marabuntas. I like it. We're getting there, John, we're getting there. In case you didn't notice, we started in 1957 with the first Prime Minister. Though they may have employment, given this strategy, the financial accumulation from crime is higher. Well, then, HYM, then if the financial accumulation from crime is higher, shouldn't the state's job be to remove that financial accumulation, not to help give them more? But the marabuntas and desperados started up with Dr. Eric Williams since 1957. The program was implemented to control the rogue elements, but an analysis later showed it brought no tangible results. And we talk about this in the live regularly. That's something I despise in government action. Regularly, the government does something. So we changed from repeat if you fail SEA, if you fail common entrance to SEA, and everyone gets a place. Was there a study to see if this was actually more effective? Or does the government just do things and we're hoping for the best, best we do something just to see how it goes? So only momentarily that could curb crime. Personally, I believe white collar crime should be the concern. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. That's some crime apologist nonsense where you try to make it seem like white collar is the... No, 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 no. White collar is not a good thing. People shouldn't attempt to swindle others. Fraud is not a good thing. But to attempt to equivocate fraud to violent crime, let's not do that. There's a reason violent crime has a different category. There is a reason. If you ask people, would they rather a violent home invasion versus someone skimming their credit card? Come on, there's a difference there. And let's not pretend there isn't. Fast track to 2002, more than 45 years later, where a group of well-known gang leaders comprising Mark Guerra, Kerwin Fresh Phillip, Herbert Screw-Up John, Glenroy Abdul Malik Charles, Roger Gillard, and Sean Bill Francis sought to negotiate with then Prime Minister Patrick Manning, now deceased, to lead the URP program during a meeting at the Ambassador Hotel. You're hearing where this goes. A group of alleged gang leaders are seeking to lead the unemployment relief program. And then we are surprised when the unemployed people end up in gangs. I mean, it's like you're creating a pipeline there. I have a bad joke to make with that. It's like you send a pimp to be the director at St. Jude's. That's what that's like to me. That's what that feels like. You send the ideal worst person to be in charge of the perfect vulnerable group for them to take advantage of. Yes, I am right. Yes, I am. The government caved into the gang leaders' demands by providing them with cushy jobs, state projects and contracts which, it was alleged, only further funded their illegal activities and created small pockets of lawless gangs which are now scattered in almost every community. Of course, if I was a criminal and you give me more resources, I would become a more resourceful criminal, because it wasn't lack of resources that made me a criminal. You see, that's why I keep pounding this in. Poverty does not cause crime. Not having resources does not make you an immoral person. You don't lose your morality when you lose your money. So if you take a criminal and think just because this criminal is poor, if I cure his poverty, he will no longer be a criminal, you will be fooled. To me, I think that's a Marxist idea. That's one of those socialist, communist kind of ideas, because Marxist, the idea of that Marxism kind of theory is that if you could provide enough of people's material needs, then you get the perfect society, the perfect utopian society. In the communist utopia, when you provide everyone's needs and everyone's needs are perfectly met, then everyone would be perfect. But that's not true. Anyone who knows anything about humans beyond surface level understands that's not how we function in reality. Brian says, so this gang thing goes way back in Trinidad. It's a negative striving spirit feeding off politics correctly. And it's a symbiotic relationship with the politics, because they feed one into each other. We last night when the current went out, and we were talking about an alleged big man in the gang business who was saying that the real gangs are the yellow and the red gangs. But in that story, they were talking about he was a director in two wholly state-funded industries, enterprises. New City Mall and what's the other mall inside Port of Spain there? He was a director in there. Alleged gang boss. Still to this day. Nathan, answer this question. Which crime affects the economy more? White collar or blue collar? That's an impossible question to answer. You can't answer that question like that, I think. But can you argue that corruption took away their poverty, so it reinforces it as a legitimate method? I'm not totally sure what you're saying there. If you're saying that poverty basically made it worse, 100%. 100%. And poverty makes it easier for them to recruit. That's what the poverty does. It makes it easier for them to see desperate people and to tantalize desperate people. Yes, I agree with that. And last week we saw who are the brokers of these meats. White leather. So the politicians making deals with the gangsters allegedly, and the police are the brokers. Is that so? But Freon, you can't answer which one affects the economy more, white collar or blue collar. There are too many dependents on that. And in some cases, some economies are propped up by the white collar crime. So, I mean, there's that. In 2006, Manning made his second attempt to broker another peace pact and met with 21 reputed gang bosses, described as community leaders, at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Port of Spain. The objective of that meeting was to stem the crime and murders that were growing in the Port of Spain district. This too brought no results, as many of the gang leaders from that meeting eventually died at the hands of a gun. You know, the way how this story unfolds, and I mean, it's about nearly all deceased people at this point in time, because even Mr. Manning too is gone. But it could sound like this. I am not, I saying one time, I am not saying this was how it went down. But the way how they gave the facts here, it could sound like this. Manning said, okay, in 2002, he met with them. I'm meeting you all on face value. You all say you all going to do this? Okay, we provide you all with the jobs. We go in the Eric Williams route. We provide you all with the jobs. You're in charge of URP. Keep the crime down. You all say you all are the community leaders. Lead the community. Show us you could control the community. All right. 2003 pass, 4 pass, 2005 pass, and the crime thing still going on. Gangs still getting on and doing the thing. 2006 pass. Manning say, you know what? We need to fine-tune this method. Reinvite those guys. We're having a meeting number 2. A second meeting. And tell them bring their lieutenants with them, you know. Let's really get to know each other. And after that one, that was the one. They didn't come to discuss contracts really. It could seem. I don't know that to be true. It could seem so. The People's Partnership government also admitted to holding talks with Laventille-based gang leaders in 2012. The National Security Minister Jack Warner confirmed sending a representative from his ministry to have a discussion with gang leaders at the St. Paul Street multipurpose facility in Laventille. The outcome of that meeting was never revealed. We're building multi-purpose facilities in these communities to be meeting places for politicians and gangsters. What kind of kleptocracy narco state we living in here? Why are white collar crimes downplayed so much in our society and not called out for what it is? Let me tell you why, Freon. Let me tell you why. Because I am not as worried about someone changing numbers in my bank account than about someone putting a gun to the face of my wife and daughter. I don't understand why that's a shocker to people. That should never be a surprise to anyone. People are more concerned about violent crime because it's violent. I remember doing the same thing last week. Like every week I have to put on the shock on behalf of people. Human beings are more concerned about the physical well-being of themselves and their loved ones than about numbers on bank accounts. What? What kind of strange human beings are they? That shocks you, Freon? That's a shocker to you? It's like kidnapping. Kidnapping is based on understanding that matrix of human priorities in what they desire. That's what kidnapping is based on. Kidnapping is based that we will take the loved one and you're willing to give up your financial goods to make sure your loved one isn't harmed. Like, come on. Would you argue the history of such communities would have some influence on their mentality? No. I would not argue against that at all. At all. Of course, the history of those communities have an effect on their mentality. It's obvious. If you look at communities with similar histories, they have similar outcomes, so it's obvious the history has something to do with it, without a doubt. You are correct, violent crimes are more focused because humans want to feel safe. Human nature is self-preservation, Brian says. Yep. Are you comparing the lesser of two evils? Yes, I am. Like, I don't understand. It's surprising to you that human beings are able to weigh the lesser of two evils. Like, that should not be a surprise to you. If you don't like Karaili and there's feces, and someone tells you you have Karaili and feces as the options to eat, there is a lesser. Is there not? That's not a shocking thing. That's not a shocking thing. And as White Leather suggests there, the fact of the reality of white collar crime is it's not as easy to just pinpoint. The violent crime, blue collar crime is much more noticeable. That's just the part of that reality too. It's more noticeable. If you go and steal something bodily from a location, they're going to notice it missing much more easily. That's just the reality of that. Everyone seems to fall for the Babylon system narrative, the white collar is lesser. On Monday, Prime Minister Rowley, during a media conference, pointed out that the police cannot and should not get involved in negotiating peace deals. His comments followed a newspaper article about that peace deal. Now, going back in history, it has no difference. Okay. Mark Guerra. Today, the TNT Guardian looks into the background of some of the country's most notorious gang leaders who utilized state funds and dabbled in corruption to build their illegal businesses. The most reputed among them was Guerra, who rose to prominence in 2002 when he was appointed national advisor in the URP program under the PNM administration, which earned him over $150,000 per month in National Housing Authority refurbishment projects and salaries for individuals who proved to be ghost gangs. Guerra used his position, job, and corrupt practices to build his empire and fund his criminal gangs in Laventille, which eventually spread throughout the country and even the prison system. So, when people ask, how did the ruffians of the 90s, I mean, there was violence and all of that. How did they turn into this well-oiled, well-funded, extremely well-armed criminal enterprise? Well, they turned into that through state funds. What allowed these slipper-wearing Nowhereans causing trouble on the outskirts of Port of Spain to turn into some of the most powerful power brokers in the country? State contracts. State contracts that did nothing to actually reduce the violence, but only made them stronger. The reason it might seem like the police have to negotiate with them instead of arresting them is because they have an infinite war chest accumulated through decades of state contracts. It's like we're fighting ourselves. Guerra's shady dealings in the URP brought in loads of cash and gave him extraordinary powers over the grassroots constituency. Described as the Don of Laventille, Guerra used his ill-gotten gains to recruit dozens of gang members in John Dorata Street, Beverly Hills, and Pashley Street, who were either unemployed school dropouts, victims of poverty, or came from single-parent homes. The Unemployment Relief Program, through its funding, directly led to the victimization of the people that they were somehow supposed to help. The programs that were created and structured to help these men get out of desperate situations sealed them into desperate situations. Imagine you're in a community. The community is already known to be a kind of hotspot community. Opportunities don't come readily in the community. All right, one of the ways you get opportunities is through the URP program. You get a little end every now and again, you get some money to keep going. All right, nice. Now, you're someone, you not on this gang thing. The gang in your community there, but you not on them, you staying away from them. You go in and get your little URP end when you could, get your little end by someone else when you could. Bam! Next thing you know, the government appoints the gang leader as the director and coordinator of the Unemployment Relief Program. So before you could even get your 10 days, the gang leader asking you, so what you could do for me? You're sealing these people into their victimization. As Guerra's empire grew, new gangs in St. Barb's and East Port of Spain emerged, making him an unstoppable force. A father of 13, Guerra, a Libya-trained marksman, openly boasted of his desire to establish two gangs and fired shots at the car carrying the then president Nur Hassan Ali's wife, Zaleha, in 1989. Affectionately called the boss by his members and Laventil residents, Guerra, who was a lieutenant in the Jamaat al-Muslimin, showed his allegiance to the PNM by openly campaigning in several marginal constituencies in the 2002 general election. Guerra, however, did not live to enjoy his luxurious lifestyle and wealth after being gunned down on his Wallafield farm in 2005. At the time of his killing, police estimated there were 40 criminal gangs in operation, which extended from Carenage to San Juan. One theory behind Guerra's murder was that a disgruntled faction of his members felt he had grown too big and etc, etc, etc. The murder of Guerra left a vacuum in which aspirants to his throne began wiping out one another in their quest to control the drug turf and state funds under the URP program. It also triggered a fresh generation of gang leaders who formed the G Unit, Rasta City, Muslim, Everybody Gets It, 6-7, and police gangs in Port of Spain. Police gang? Interesting. And if you continue in this story, many other names are called, but the storyline continues about the same. Government funds a reputed gangster. Government funds a reputed gangster. The gangster becomes more gangsterish and more powerful. As gangsters do, they eventually are murdered. The increased power that the government funded causes a splintering of gangs, each with a piece of that power. And splintered gangs get extremely violent, and violence erupts in that area. Sponsored by our dear government. And then, maybe when that violence continues for a couple years, a couple of them die out, who is the leader comes to the top, the leader surfaces to the top, another government comes in, speaks to them, tells them, get control of your community. You know, if you get control of your community, there are lucrative state contracts in this and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the government comes in, gives him some state contracts, he gets very wealthy, he reinforces his gang, strengthens his power base, becomes too big for his boots, the cycle repeats. Murder and mayhem sponsored by government relief programs. Programs to help the poorest, most vulnerable members of our society. You see, that's one of the many problems in governance. It's easy to talk about helping people. Like, okay, I say I don't like that there are fat people in Trinidad and we'd like to make sure there are no more fat people in Trinidad. Okay, that's a nice thing. How do you do it? What is the method with which you do it? If you come in and say, well, I'm going to just get rid of all the fat people. Okay, that's a nice goal. But how? How exactly do you plan on doing that? How exactly does that happen? And the thing is, this kind of criminal activity isn't without effect on the wider society beyond just the violence. Beyond just the violence. Invite them for talks and grab all of them. If you came there, then you're in the gang. Well, Superfunk, they have lawyers. You grab them, you're going to be sued. You're going to be sued. This is Trinidad. The lawyers in this country work. And I was looking at one of the heads in the contracting industry was complaining about this very same thing. Contractor Emil Elias urges government opposition, stop playing the fool on crime initiatives. He was pointing out in this, as being one of the leading contractors in the country, that this criminal activity funded by the government, just by the way, we just went through how it's funded by the state, turns around and costs the state more money. Because when a contractor goes in to do a job, these gangs that are funded by the state-funded gangs, come in and extort the contractor. If the contractor now must pay more money to get the job done, the contractor charges that more to the state, so the state is paying double again. And by the way, when we say the state is paying double, the state doesn't have a money tree. The state is us. The state gets its money from us. So the state sponsors the gangs that turn around and rob the state more. If crime stops, what happens to the economy? It blossoms. Just certain parts of the economy may die. And, you know, someone asked what we do to change this and how we fix it. And I think that's the problem right there. Many people, especially in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, they aren't interested in changing things. You look at people, you look at just what we are speaking about. You look at broken systems that are not functioning. And people's solution to it is we just have to do it better. But it's not functioning. Throw it away. No, we could make this work. We just have to do it better. I was reading and listening to some people talking about this with Petrotrin. Mistake to shut down Petrotrin. Panelists at OWTU forum. Now, listen. In the first place, if it's a forum held and officiated by the oil workers trade union, the oil field workers trade union, I kind of guess which direction the panelists would lean on. Like, I've already thrown away that young, growing, idealistic view that scientists and experts are really just telling you the truth. Look who is sponsoring, look who is the head of their thing, and they speak generally in line with that. Word night, Donald Leslie. And several of these experts on this panel were saying that closing Petrotrin was the wrong thing. Trinidad and Tobago cannot withstand the economic impact of shutting down another state-owned enterprise like the former Petrotrin oil refinery. Economist Dr. Marlene At says. At a lecturer of the university was speaking at the OWTU's panel. The discussion was moderated by JTAM Assistant Secretary, who said 5 years on, some former workers remained on the breadline. Now, here's the thing. Whether Petrotrin should have been opened or not, Ronnie, should never have been decided on whether workers would remain on the breadline. So we're talking about the crime situation and how we have been treating with crime for many years in Trinidad and Tobago, employing the criminals in different relief programs. If we were to try to stop that, from the jump, there would be lots of people losing their jobs immediately. If you cut all state funding to those gangsters, there are many people who would become unemployed immediately. And that's part of the reason why many people will not do it. Trinidad has this culture throughout our country where the ultimate good is making jobs. I don't agree with that. I think jobs are a resultant reality of providing a resource that people need. The more important thing is providing a good service, providing good resources, not getting a job. And the kind of getting a job mentality stalls things like this. So Petrotrin was bleeding money. But no. Let's not close it. It should have never been closed because there would be people losing a job. PSA seeks to stop start of Revenue Authority on December 1st. The Public Services Association has made good on its promise to appeal the judgment of the High Court on the TT Revenue Authority. The Revenue Authority is seeking to change the shape of the public service a bit, change how it functions in terms of the revenue collection, coalesce several areas into one main authority. The public service union is worried that this is going to cause some people to lose their jobs. It's not a worry about whether revenue would be collected better. It's not a worry about whether it would be more efficient. No. No one should lose their job. So they are going to sue the state till the Privy Council to make sure this cannot happen, to make sure no one loses their job. So sometimes, when we ask about why some of those things are so hard to solve, it's because of a lot of us. Do you have a government work where you do much less than you are paid for, and you would be front and center protesting and calling people wicked and nasty if you lose that job? Is that you? Well, then you are part of the whole system too. You would be part of that system too. Thank you, Adam Price. Everyone can't have a job, the mayor says. That's just reality, but the employment rate is very important. Mayor, I actually believe everyone could have a job, I actually do believe that. I think we need to throw away minimum wage for one. That's one of the issues. Throw away minimum wage. To get a good economy, they could have asked Gaddafi, but they killed him. I see you're an Islamist, Ramjan Baksh. I am not. I am not. Sorry, no. It doesn't work like that. And you would not have wanted to live under Gaddafi. Like, okay, yes. The US was involved in ousting Gaddafi. Gaddafi was hated by his own people. Also, some of his own people at least, for good reason. Like, it's like we were talking about the guy earlier, choosing between the lesser of two evils and all of that. In geopolitics, looking at situations in geopolitics, it's regularly important to remind yourself you're not looking at Justice League or X-Men when you were an adolescent child or a teenager. It's not the good guy and the bad guy necessarily here. Just because one guy is bad doesn't mean the guy he is fighting is good. Or because a bad guy attacks someone else means the person the bad guy attacks must be good. Very often, I think in most of the cases, it's kind of bad guy versus bad guy. And you make a fool of yourself attempting to squeeze one of the bad guys into a good guy shape to take his side. It's kind of bad guy versus bad guy here. It's like that's why war crimes is a ridiculous prospect. War is a crime. There's no war. There's no crime in war. The whole thing is the crime. It's like, to me, hate crime. If you do a crime against me, you do a crime. Whether you hated me because I was black or not while you perpetrated the crime is irrelevant. The crime is the main problem there. The crime is a crime. How much hatred or not you have in your heart is irrelevant. So, yeah. Gaddafi wasn't the good guy. And you would not have wanted to live under his leadership. Do not be fooled. Trends have power to change your society slowly but surely. Correct, Superfunk. That's why I partly do what I do. And when people ask me these questions, my answer is pretty much always the same. My answer is pretty much always the same. The solution is cultural. The solution is cultural. And that's a hard thing to think about, a hard thing to do, because we would like to think that, okay, there is some kind of grand effort we could do where we all pour onto the streets for a week, and after 7 days of all of us marching in the streets, Trinidad is reformed and revolutionized into a perfect utopia. But that's not going to happen. No, everyone won't be satisfied if they get $1 million back. They won't. So the solution is cultural. One little bit of culture at a time, as difficult as that seems. And you know, as it was the week, was it the week or the day for eradicating gender-based violence, I was looking at something and it was kind of right in the line of, seeing a problem, but what is the solution? Because with the gender-based violence business, I am not for gender-based violence. I don't think men should be beating up on women or anything of the such. I don't think that's a good thing. My problem is, very often when you hear people come up and say, we need to do something about gender-based violence, they're always talking about the government, which is giving more power to a politician. Anytime anyone says the government has to do X, forget about X. Just understand what you're saying is you're giving more power to the politician, because you aren't even sure that X will be accomplished. So, okay, we want to eradicate gender-based violence. So what do? We give the government the power to fully educate our children on all aspects of their sexuality. Okay, that's going to eradicate gender-based violence? Maybe it might. We could try it. It does not. It does not. We could see the problem. We might even agree on the problem. Where we differ is the solution. And what you tend to see plenty of the times, a little trick that people play sometimes, is when both of us see a problem, we agree there's a problem, but we disagree on the solution. So dishonest people would look at you and say, well, because you disagree on my solution, you're saying that the problem is a good thing. No, I disagree on your solution. So, we spoke about corporal punishment briefly some time ago. If a child requires discipline, both of us agree to this. But let's say I'm in the no corporal punishment view, you are in the pro corporal punishment view. Because I am no corporal punishment, you can't look at me and say that I want an indisciplined child. I do not want my child to be disciplined because I don't believe in corporal punishment. No, I do believe that children should be disciplined too. I just have a different means that I think could be used. I can be wrong, but you can't say that I don't see the problem too. We aren't going back down that road right now, Mia. We went down that road a while back. We're on a different route right now. Well, everybody should stop talking and try their hand. I agree. But my problem is a lot of the people who are talking, they're asking for things that I don't want. So you would end up with me protesting against you, and it's not that I want more women to be abused. It's that the way you think to solve this is not how I want to solve it. Let's just look at one of these articles before I dive out here. Lecturer: increasing crime causes more abuse of women and girls. Senior lecturer at the UE Institute of Gender and Development Studies, Dr. Gabriel Hossein, says as murder and crime increases, so too does violence against women. And now that statement to me is like, duh? Why is that even a noteworthy observation? If a country gets more violent, more people get violence perpetrated against them. And I don't suppose this is what she was trying to say there, but sometimes when you hear these things mentioned in gender-based conversations, it could nearly sound, hear what I'm saying, it could nearly sound like what they're saying is, as violence increases, more men should die, but no more women should die. What? Why? If there's an increase in violence, more humans would get violence. Hossein, also in News, the columnist, said that included how women were affected by gang violence and crime. She said social fear was exacerbated by women's intersectional and gender vulnerability. Hey, this reminded me of a quote from Hillary Clinton. Women, biggest victims of war. It reminds me of a quote. You're right. Women have always been the primary victims of war. Women lose their husbands, their fathers, their sons in combat. That is actually a quote from Hillary Clinton. Hillary Rodham Clinton, former First Lady, former Secretary of State, and candidate for President of the United States, and renowned feminist. Women have always been the primary victims of war. Women lose their husbands, their fathers, their sons in combat. Less than the Muslims over time, Ramjan Baksh. Less than the Muslims over time. Or the Arabs, I should say, because Muslims is too wide of a statement. Less than the Arabs over time. Anyway, the statement of the lecturer kind of gives me a feeling down back that road also, where it's nearly like you're looking at victimization in gang culture and violent crime. And if we are being honest, in gang culture and violent crime, by and large, the victims are men. But using that to turn it around to still highlight women in that issue. That's activism. When you're a hammer, everything is a nail. Bad activism, in my opinion. Let me look at some of what they see. This year's campaign also calls on governments worldwide to share how they are investing in gender-based violence prevention. I'll be very curious to know this. How does a government invest in gender-based violence prevention? And I regularly hear people talk about education. Let's not go down that road, Baksh. Let's not go down that road. I regularly hear people talk about education. Like, you could teach people out of being abusers. If that were true, the most educated people would never be abusive. That's not the case. What proof do we have that you can educate someone out of abuse? Is it that when someone is being abusive, they believe that this is the right thing to do? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think most people who are abusing someone know they shouldn't be abusing someone. They have that knowledge. They are well educated on the fact. It's like there's this ad that plays, and I spoke about this before because every time I see it, it annoys me to no end. An ad that plays on the television, it plays all over in some of the government offices with a woman with a Venezuelan accent pleading and begging for her abusers not to abuse her, and what would you do, and what would you think, and this is what they do to me, and this is what they did to me, and you shouldn't, and I'm thinking to myself, the only people that commercial would affect is the men that will not abuse her. The men that are interested in abusing that woman, they might just get turned on by that commercial. The commercial doesn't push them away from it. Knowledge somehow, like somehow the men who are trafficking women don't know that these women are living in hell. They don't know that, If you sit these men down and educate them, right. For Hossein, the start of the campaign was a day nationally to see violence against women as complex, not just as violent relationships, but violence predominantly by men, as women and girls experience it in all aspects of their lives. She said it was important to remember that there was always more states could do, which may not require more resources, but political will and commitment. And this is what I am scared of. This is what I am afraid of. You see these kinds of statements? She said it was important to remember there was always more states could do. And this is why feminism and increasing of state power goes hand in hand. Here's a brutal reality of human societies through the years. Human societies through the years didn't always have the need for a very strong state because there was a very strong family, by and large. As a woman, your protection, don't listen to the feminist lies. Men were not beating up on women since we were cavemen coming out of the caves, and that's the only history of the humans. That's a feminist lie. That's not how it was. Men didn't only now start to learn to love women in 1950. That didn't happen like that. That's not the way that occurred. But generally speaking, the protection that many women got was because of their family, the surroundings of their family, of their loved ones. You marry someone, that's your protector. But in a world where they atomize people more, especially for women, an atomized, especially a young woman, an atomized young woman needs an extremely strong state to provide protection around her. And that statement there's always more the state could do, is basically giving a blank check of power to the state. When we look in modern times and see some countries arresting people for things they say on Twitter, some countries arresting people for saying someone with a hanging genital is a man, the reason those things come about is because of ideas like this, where there is no limit to the power a state would take to protect people. You know, to protect people. That is scary. And I don't want more violence against women. I think it's a horrible thing. No, it's not two countries only, Ronnie. Not two countries at all. I think it's a horrible thing. But I think this solution is not a solution. I know it could sound conspiratorial, but I honestly believe that the political movements of the 20th century Marxism versus capitalism and all that nonsense that played off filtered into social movements, and many of these feminists don't understand that what they are campaigning for is the communist revolution, while that is what they are campaigning for. What do you mean there's always more the state can do? No, there is not. Feminist efforts to raise awareness about violence against women and girls in the Caribbean and Titi have made a significant impact on public consciousness about issues such as sexual violence and intimate partner violence, Hussein said. Previously, there was much more shame and silence around these issues, she added. People were now clearer on holding perpetrators and states accountable, Hussein said. We know now that our beliefs about manhood and womanhood still reproduce dangerous ideas of male dominance over women. And we know that women continue to live in fear of men, whether in the homes or in public spaces. So there's much still to change. Tell me, what can the state do? What can the state do to remove male dominance over women? Someone give me that answer. What can a state do to remove male dominance over women? Because that's part of the issue she's saying. That our views on manhood and womanhood are what creates us even viewing that males have dominance over women. What can the state do to stop that? And how can human beings change their view to stop humans from viewing males as having dominance over females? How can we change our view from that? When, as a child, my daughter, she is 1 year and some change. When she looks up, she sees her daddy up there. She sees her mommy up there, but not as much. Nobody needs to teach that little girl who is the dominant one in that relationship. That's not a lesson I need to teach my daughter. That, I am physically dominant in the relationship between your mother and I. My daughter has eyes and sense. They pick that up for themselves. So part of the problem with what some of these feminist efforts are going against, they're trying to go against nature in and of itself. I am sorry if you don't like the fact that men are physically dominant to women. It's the biological reality of a dimorphic species like the Homo sapien. I mean, if you were a hyena, it would have been different. In hyenas, the females are bigger, more dominant, and go read about hyenas if you're interested. Hyenas would be great feminists. Unfortunately, mankind is not like that. And there's no amount of artificial educating you could do to stop that from happening. Now, here's where I believe we should actually be focused, and why I think sometimes what some feminists do is actually counterproductive to their goals. If males are indeed dominant physically to women, the worst thing you could do is attempt to teach those two that they are the same. That's the worst thing you could do. Sense would dictate you teach the different genders that have different genetic expressions, different social ways of managing themselves. But instead of using common sense that the humans have used since we're crawling around the earth in barely any clothing, instead of using that, no. We will see the obvious reality and attempt to force some kind of distorted reality on it. And somehow see that through state power and educating of people, somehow that's going to change. I think the dominance referred isn't about physical differences. It's about the right to control. And in that case, if you're talking about that, I think you need to be very specific in your language. And I think more and more in these gendered conversations, because if you're on the internet now, you know these gender conversations, they go insane really quickly. I think if you are trying to speak on these things and not just add to the noise, you have to get specific in your language. So when you say dominance, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And it can't be physical differences because that's reality. Do you mean leadership and the submission ideals that some people have in the more traditional senses? And in that case, why is that a bad thing? If a woman, Little Miss Mediator, if the dominance referred to here is about the right to control, if a woman wants her man to control her, if that's the case, is it a feminist's business to get in there and tell that woman, no man should control you? If a woman wants that, so like it to me, exactly, it is a choice. So to me, to make it seem, and that's what she did there, she made it seem like our views on manhood, and Ramjan Bach, you're starting to spam now, you're repeating the same things. Where she said that our views on manhood and womanhood and dominance has led to that. It gave a moral prescription to it, that it's a bad thing. Why? Says who? One of the ways to create generational change around gender-based violence was to adopt a school-based approach. And this was where the government needed committed investment. Listen carefully. Listen carefully to why this gets so scary so quickly. We're talking about gender-based violence. Women having violence perpetrated against them. And this is where they get to. One of the best ways to create generational change around gender-based violence was to adopt the school-based approach. And this was where the government needed committed investment. They're going after the schools with the intention to change the children's view from their parents' view. I don't interpret it like that. People twist ideals to justify their actions. I do interpret it like that, Little Miss Mediator. Because I believe if I ask her her beliefs on submission, etc., 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 and male dominance, I think it would lean a certain way. I think I've read enough feminist studies, feminist talks, where I kind of know where it leans. They are not pro submission and traditional gender roles as much of choice as they talk about. And understand this. When you say that you are attempting to make a generational change on an issue by doing a school-based approach, you are saying you are attempting to get children to have a different view from their parents by influencing them through the school. To do something like that, you best be darn well sure that whatever that change of view is 100% better. For you to interfere with the passing on of ideals, norms, ideologies from parent to child, you are fast and out of place. Biologically, making a child is how you allow for passing down your ideals to the next generation. If you think your ideals and views and morals are the best in the world, do like Mark Guerra, make 13 children and teach all 13 children it. Do not play you going to attempt to separate people's children from them. Well, you will see Joey Lawrence. She said groups have been advocating for the government to invest in gender-based violence prevention through education in schools using the health and family life education curriculum. The UNESCO website said the regional curriculum framework was tailored for ages 9 to 14 and organized around 4 themes: self and interpersonal relationships, sexuality and sexual health, eating and fitness, and managing in the environment. Sexuality and sexual health as part of the curriculum to teach 9 to 14. Little Miss Mediator says there are limits to that when you participate in a society. True. There are limits to what you could pass on, limits to what you can do. Those limits in a free society should not be anything that is within the bounds of the law. That's where those limits are. The limits to what I could pass on is legality. You, as the state, have no right to attempt to change the views of my child on sexuality. What? And the good thing I like about this is I am glad Canada and the United States and the United Kingdom and Australia have reached as far as they have reached down this route. So the gaslighting could be thrown out. So when people see sexuality and sexual health, and you try to come to tell them that all you want to teach the child is about, how to be healthy, they could tell you it's BS. Because we saw the people who went racing down this road, and we saw where it led. Yes, I believe we do have power to prevent these changes. In the United States, when the pandemic broke out, and many people stayed at home, and many more people started looking at what the teachers were teaching, homeschooling erupted. The number of people homeschooling is still on the rise, even after the pandemic. They said it, and these people regularly say the quiet part out loud. If you want to make any real change, educating the next generation is where it's done. You want to control the future? Educate the next generation. I think homeschooling can be dangerous. I think schooling on a whole can be dangerous. I don't think homeschooling is any more dangerous than public schooling. And I think the idea that somehow a child is most at danger in their parents' company is a toxic idea. That's a toxic idea. That somehow the most dangerous place for a child is in their parents' care. They say Marxists don't have children, they have yours. And if you go through the history of many of those movements, they purposefully went into the education field in the 60s. Those communists, hippies, Marxists, etc., who said what their beliefs were clearly, they went into the universities in the 60s and they are still there now. Like, homeschooling was how people were always schooled. Homeschooling is the norm, not the exception. Public schooling is the new thing. That's the new strange thing, not homeschooling. I think open-minded is overrated. So many of our people are open-minded, so open their brain falls out of their mind. And I don't think socializing in school creates more empaths. I think if you went to any primary school, the influence of primary school is to reduce your empathy. Children are brutal. If anything, I would say sending my child to public school is where they go to be a little less empathetic. Don't go feeling feelings for everybody. Don't go feeling feelings for everybody. Go to primary school, let these children cuss you about your dead relative, and recognize they don't care. If you have a flaw in your physical body, trust me, they will point it out for you. So the idea that somehow school is going to create more empathetic humans, Where's the evidence of that? Where's the proof of that? I don't see the proof of that at all. Guess I'm thinking about the amount of time spent in school. And again, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I have nephews that go to school, and some of them are annoyed. Some of them that are clever. They're all clever. But because they are clever, they are annoyed that school lasts so long and I'm finished with what I'm doing in like quarter of the time. I'm wasting my time in school. And those little children know that because they have comparative. They have some experience in homeschooling and they have experience in the public schooling arena, and they could see in homeschooling I get more work done, and then I could go do other things. I could go in the garden, I could go learn something, I could go be curious somewhere else. In school, I'm done with the lesson, I'm just sitting here watching these four walls, listening to the ignoramuses talk, and the most indisciplined children are the one getting the most attention. Why is that a positive thing? Right. I know, K baby. We were just discussing it. And for people who think homeschooling doesn't have socializing, they haven't met those homeschooling mothers. I urge y'all, go talk to a homeschooling mother. If you're wondering how their children get socialized, I'm in some homeschool networks. A homeschool mother is a whole different creature. The amount of cards they have for after school program, this, that, and meet up here, meet up there. Those homeschool children are having a lit time. They imagine all your socializing is field trips basically. What? Which child wouldn't prefer that? Instead of socializing on the hot asphalt in the schoolyard, could go look at some scarlet ibis in the swamp. Go watch the mud volcano. See China Pitch Lake. Yes, I think so too, Wendell. I do think they get exposed to way more in homeschool. And I think it's so much better. The difficulty of homeschool generally is the vast majority of homeschoolers, that's why I said homeschooling moms, come from families where they're gainfully employed enough that the mother is oftentimes not full-time employed or has an employment where she could be much more involved in that kind of thing. That's the negative of this, which I don't really see as a negative. Maybe, K baby, maybe. And something homeschooling does as a teacher, something that homeschooling does for parents, is it allows parents to see when they're lying about their children. You know, when you're saying your child understands everything, and you know he's pick up everything fast, you know, and that teacher just not teaching good, that teacher don't know how to reach through to him. Okay, moms, okay. You take little Brandon. You take Brandon, sit down with Brandon for half hour. And let's see how you do with little Brandon, moms. Mommy, you who love him so much, let's see how you do. So it gives parents a more honest view of their children. So in public school, many parents could not have a clear view of what their child is doing, how their child is performing, the character of their child. I know many parents who have no idea about how their child acts or behaves in school. That's not the same with homeschooling. Your cousin is a smart person, Ronnie. Your cousin is a very smart person. All right, people. I'm glad you do, K baby. I'm glad. You have to also take into consideration not all parents educated enough to homeschool their kid, though. That's true. That's true. But it may not be as much of a problem as you might think. It is true, but it may not be as much of a problem as you might think. Oftentimes, if a parent is caring and careful enough to want to pay attention enough to want their child homeschooled, they're very often caring and attentive enough to get the resources to get it done. That's just my view on that, generally speaking. All right. We're looking to close there, people. Any further comments or questions on the inside before we dive out? As Trini Hotep says, be mindful, not mindless. Correct, correct. Going for the 10K. 10K what? Likes? Ronnie, you looking to keep me here till 12. That's the plan. Till 12. We'll get 10K tomorrow. All right, people, that's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. I am Nathan Springer. Let Tiantech know not to play with me time, please, bro. But to be, as I said at the beginning of the live, to be fair to Tiantech, I don't think that was a Tiantech fault. I believe someone crashed into a light pole somewhere in my neighborhood, well, in my vicinity, and that kind of knocked out the light. Only came back like 3 o'clock. It went for a long time. Came back 3 o'clock in the morning somewhere there. Man had to pull out his kerosene lamp. And I didn't have a shade for my kerosene lamp. And without a shade, all the kerosene smoke leaves the kerosene soot all over. This morning, well, had a couple places to wipe well. But I want to make sure. I have to get all my proper parts for my lamp. Yeah, y'all, for light? What do you mean lamp for what? Lamp is for light. Your kerosene lamp. You don't know about a kerosene lamp, Ronnie? Like I don't know. I like old stuff and all of that. It's interesting to me. So I wanna make sure I get all the parts to refurbish my old lamp. That lamp is for sure older than me. I don't even know exactly how old it is. Phone, and then if the current goes for so long that your phone battery dies, what next? I need the burner, the metal piece to screw on to the top there to hold the wick. I need the burner. I heard that, Carter. I have fair and square in my to-do list very soon this week. Went and got some grocery shopping done. You know, once you get that grocery shopping done, no more grocery for the year until Christmas. We could wish. Yeah, KB, it bad, eh? It bad. I like it to myself. All right, people. Thank you for joining in. I'll see you guys again for the next Mindful Live. Can't wait for New Year's. For the next Mindful Live, which is going to be tomorrow evening, starting around 9:30. Tomorrow I'll be starting around 9:30, people. So I'll see you guys then. Until then, stay well. Be well. Have a safe one. Peace. I'm out.